I have an ongoing series on the channel titled The Day It Died. They're video essays in which I discuss movie franchises and TV shows that have seemingly overstayed their welcome. And for the longest time, I've gone back and forth with making an installment on the Ted movies, as it is, in my opinion, one of the quickest falls from grace I've ever seen a movie series have. I mean, this is Highlander levels of instantaneous franchise fatigue. All the goodwill the first movie drummed up with fans was snuffed out within the first few moments of the second one. The only reason that video was never made was because of my own personal rules about critiquing something as a franchise. There needs to be at least 3 installments. And in this case, there were only 2. Ted was genuinely one of my favorite comedies at that point in life. It was one of the most simple and yet still somehow innovative stories I'd ever seen. The movie made me want to see more. Until I finally did see more, in which case that movie made me wish I saw less. And that seemed to be the end of Ted. We had our fill of the talking teddy bear. And in a lot of ways, the Ted brand felt like the Ted character, a past its prime one-hit wonder. And then the Ted series came out, and completely redeemed itself. This very much feels like a callback to the first film, both because there are a boatload of references to that movie, but also in terms of tone and charm. It seems to take everything from Ted that worked, and none of Ted 2 which did not. This miniseries effortlessly captures the characters from the movies, which is understandable in Ted's case, as he's once again voiced by Seth MacFarlane, whose Ted sounds more and more like Peter Griffin with each passing second.
I guess, mission accomplished, huh?
Oh, come on, I do not sound that much like Peter Griffin.
Though despite the similarities in MacFarlane's mascots, the two do feel distinct. Sure, both characters could take an IQ test and have it come back negative, but Ted has a lot more energy, and seems to be a little bit more of a schemer than Peter's ever been. In the case of John Bennett, this time around he's played by Max Burkholder, who truly does come off like a young Marky Mark. I know in interviews he's claimed that that's not his intent, but even if it isn't, he succeeds.
It was weird at first, but I got over it pretty quick. Especially going in, I wanted to make sure I wasn't doing a Mark Wahlberg impression.
I think we fixed it.
Yeah, I think so too.
I feel really good right now.
Will do. Look, here it goes in a really important pocket for really important stuff. Okay?
Can we talk about this another time and just enjoy our anniversary dinner?
Oh, you sure? Why not? It's a great feeling. I can't recommend it enough.
He does genuinely come off as a younger version of Wahlberg's John. He's made to look the part, and he definitely sounds the part. But most importantly, he acts the part. He has the same clueless but outspoken delivery of Wahlberg. I don't even know how to properly describe it, but it just sort of sounds like he's always asking questions, even when he's making declarative statements. Like, all of his lines end in periods, but he reads them with question marks.
What? No.
John is constantly shown to be clueless, looking to the guidance of his best friend, a teddy bear, to solve his problems. In trying to do just that and legitimize John's trust in him, Ted usually causes more problems in the process. Just like in the movie series, the most profound part of this miniseries is the friendship between the two. You get a real feel for the bond that they have, though that relationship does seem slightly altered here. While I feel like the movies showcase the two as being best friends, in the series, they feel closer to being brothers, which is probably helped by the two sitting across the table from John's parents at dinner, sharing bunk beds, and just basically living under the same roof. The characters still feel like the characters, for the most part. John's mother and father do feel incredibly different from their brief appearance in the first film. And I'm not just talking about their change in appearance either, though that doesn't really help. You know, it's hard to imagine Lois Griffin and the dude from the Joe Schmo show somehow turning into the chick from Waiting and Steve Smith. But even aside from that, they're depicted entirely different. Sure, the couple in the opening of the movie were mostly nondescript, but in that short scene we get a feel for their personalities. John's father didn't have this accent, and John's mother wasn't this naive. On top of that, the two were very happy and openly flirtatious with one another. Whereas here, that's not really a thing. But what's most confusing is that in the movie, these characters are referred to as Helen and Steve. But in the series, they're Susan and Maddie. All of this seems strange, especially when you consider the levels this show goes to in other avenues to keep some sort of established continuity. They show footage from the first film. They use the same song from the movie, making references and call forwards to future events. In the first season, John and Ted find their love of plants and smoking them. Ted and John make references to improv. Improv which they've been known to attend, if only just to heckle the performers. The show even recreates exact moments from the first Ted movie, much like the second Ted movie. Except, this time around, good. They even have John and Ted create the Thunder Buddies song at the end of the first season. They put all this effort into making sure that this aligns with what's already been established, but they still completely rewrite the parents' characters in the process. I don't know, it's just strange pick and choose canon. This isn't a complaint necessarily, just something that I think's worth noting. Ultimately, I do think this changes for the better. The Bennetts in the show are far more entertaining over-the-top caricatures that both blend in better with their environment and lend to more fun, creative comedic possibilities. His parents are an odd couple in every sense of the phrase. Matty is an absolute man-child. He's a loud, short-tempered, selfish, obnoxious oaf who makes everyone else around him miserable, except for me at home watching because he's hilarious. He's a whiny, self-centered jerk who is quick to play the victim card. Matty is so racist, sexist, and homophobic that even Archie Bunker would probably tell the guy to tone it down. And while the character borders on the lines of unlikable in-universe, out here he's a highlight. The ignorant things he says don't often feel like they're said out of malice, but instead misinformation, misunderstanding, or just stupidity. And to his credit, he lives and learns, developing throughout the course of the first 7 episodes. Not changing his own values, but instead learning to accept others. And you know what? I kinda like that. In spite of everything this character does, he defies expectation by actually showing that he does have a heart, causing him to stand up for his family despite his disagreements with them. But who cares about any of that crap? He's got a funny voice! Scott Grimes really outdoes himself here. I would honestly say that his role here is on the same level of arguably his most famous role in American Dad. As a matter of fact, I would push it one step forward and say that this surpasses that. His wife Susan is an oblivious housewife, who probably does more to enable her husband's bad behavior than do anything to combat it. Much like her husband, she's definitely a product of the time. She's willfully naive, even willing to disregard what she's just seen so long as it means keeping the peace. Her life revolves solely around keeping up the housework, attempting to please her husband, and providing the best life for her family in any way that she can. But she's happy with things that way. When she's given the opportunity to broaden her horizons, to seek greener pastures, she chooses to remain comfortable and content in the dysfunction of her family. And in a weird way, there's actually almost something beautiful about that. The new additions the series creates work just as well as the originals. Also living with the Bennetts is John's cousin Blair, who kind of acts as the anti-Matty. She's very much on the opposite side of the spectrum. She's often the voice of reason, but can also fall into her family's dysfunction. Despite being a lot more socially conscious and just overall uptight, it's nice to see her unwind and actually bond with her younger cousin and his teddy bear. What a weird sentence that was. I really enjoyed their dynamic. The Bennett's bizarre relationship, Blair's commentary on the absurdity, and John and Ted's general disassociation from any of it. In a weird way, this feels like a really raw and real family. I enjoy a lot of their banter, and I would credit the relationships of this household as being the major factor at what makes this prequel work. Because this is a new side to the main characters that we've never seen before. In the originals, little was ever said about John's family life or Ted's upbringing. So this series is bringing something new to the table, and not just recycling old bits without rhyme or reason. While the show does feel like the second coming of the once-dead Ted brand, it can also a lot of the time come off like a live-action Family Guy. Not that that is necessarily a complaint, as it seems to more closely emulate the earlier seasons of that show when it was in its prime, as opposed to the more modern-day episodes where it is far past that point. There are plenty of jokes and bits that I could very easily see as cartoon cutaway gags, But what makes me appreciate them more here is that these moments aren't at the expense of the plot at hand. They're in service of it. They don't pause the plot for a punchline. They let it play out naturally, with the punchline being the payoff of the plot. Sometimes the plot does get distracted, but it's not just senselessly cutting away to a random skit. There's either a disruption by someone involved in the main story that briefly spins off into something else for a while, or there's an outlandish fantasy sequence based on something that's happening in the main plot. I'm not going to try to break down and analyze comedy, but what I will say is that I personally believe both the story and the jokes work better when they're not separate from each other. When the show plays out fluidly and the jokes come from the actual events at hand. I don't want to keep bringing up Family Guy as I want to judge this show on its own merit, but when talking about Ted, it is an absolute inevitability that Family Guy will be brought up. Not only because this seems to share the same comedic stylings as that show, but also because it shares a lot of the same cast as that show. There's plenty of familiar faces here, but more so over plenty of very famous voices.
It was awful because when he beat me, my teeth were also in my hairpiece.
I don't think the miniseries goes one episode without someone from Family Guy or American Dad showing up. However, unlike Family Guy, this doesn't rely on modern-day pop culture, being as it's set in the 90s, which is to the benefit of the series. You see, because Family Guy, and as a matter of fact, come to think of it, the Ted movies themselves being set in the times that the projects were being made, you'll find that a lot of the humor is reliant on what was popular at the time, and not all of that resonates in a later rewatch. Not every piece of pop culture sticks, so what's relevant in 2012 might be a long-forgotten relic in 2024. However, if you're making something set back in the day, it's easier to look back on that with rose-tinted glasses and highlight what people remember from that decade. In my personal opinion, I think this show benefits from that a little bit, though it does so in short spurts, as it doesn't feel tied down to the decade that it's set in, and the time and place is just the same. Although with that being said, sometimes it does feel like it's taking too much of today into yesterday. A lot of the talking points surrounding politics and political correctness feels a lot more indicative of modern time rather than symbolic of times past. They even make full-blown references to recent events, and a lot of the time when they do that, they fall flat.
Keep my truck's name out your mouth.
God, Lori Loughlin, that woman can do no wrong.
Bet Bill Cosby's having a good Christmas. Bet he doesn't have to deal with a bunch of women telling him he's a jerk.
The show is pretty close to perfect, but it isn't without some minor faults. In my opinion, anyway. There are some creative decisions that I kind of question. The same episode where Ted questions if he's Jesus Christ resurrected? Not kidding, that is the plot of this episode. Ted questions if he's Jesus due to the interesting circumstances surrounding his birth. Yet in this same episode, the show brings to life Maddie's talking toy truck, Dennis, the exact same way Ted is brought to life. And yet these two separate storylines don't very often intersect, and they actually kind of clash and contradict each other without care or concern. There's a little crossover in passing lines, but you would think that a talking truck being brought to life through means of a shooting star would negate Ted believing himself to be the second coming. Again, what a sentence that was. I don't know, narratively it seems all over the place. And just the mere existence of Dennis the dump truck makes Ted feel a little bit less special. But really, that is my only major complaint about this entire season. Since the series is a miniseries, there's a lot less room for error or filler, so it's a lot more hit than miss. This predecessor is a worthy successor to the first flick, providing the same absurd gags, bad taste humor, but most importantly, heart. There's that same weird wholesomeness that made that movie an instant classic present here. That same soul that was missing from the sequel. And that's why I'm shocked to say I would actually be up to see more of the Ted franchise. If, and only if, they could keep up with this quality. If not, then this is a much more fitting goodbye to the character, and I think it definitely helps raise the quality of the marquee. If this is a sign for things to come, then I welcome it, but if this is the note that we're ending on, then I think it's a good one to end it on. So if you like this video and would want to see me take a look back at the Ted movies, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
Bear talking.
Little teddy bear. I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was V Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time, same bat channel.